There is a block of stone lying in the dust of the Bolivian altiplano that most tourists photograph and walk past in 30 seconds. It is gray, it is heavy, it is broken. And on first glance, it looks like rubble, the kind of debris you'd find at any ancient ruin anywhere on the planet. Most people walk right past it. A few crouch down, run a finger along its edge, and stand back up without saying anything. But if you look at this stone, really look at it, you begin to understand that something is deeply wrong with the story you were taught about the ancient world. The stone is called an H block. It is found at a site in western Bolivia called Puma Punku. It weighs several tons. It fits with millimeter precision into other identical H blocks that surround it, like the pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. The tolerances on its internal angles are accurate to fractions of a degree. Its surfaces are flat enough to be mistaken for machined metal. And hidden inside its geometry is something that shouldn't exist, because this block was not made with iron tools. There was no iron in pre-Columbian South America at industrial scale. There was no steel. There was no lathe. There was no machine of any recorded kind, and yet the block in front of you is cut with a precision that challenges what modern engineers say is possible, using only stone hammers and bronze chisels. This is not a myth. This is not a metaphor. This is a block of stone that you can touch right now, today, and measure yourself. And it has been sitting in that field for over 1,500 years, waiting for someone to ask the right question. If you are watching this channel for the first time, subscribe now. Every week, we go deeper into the discoveries that the history books left out. Hit the bell, stay with us. The site is officially designated as Puma Punku, sometimes written as two words, Puma Punku, meaning Gate of the Puma in the Aymara language. It sits at an elevation of 12,594 feet above sea level on the Bolivian altiplano, roughly 45 miles west of the modern city of La Paz, adjacent to the larger ceremonial complex known as Tiwanaku. The first systematic Western archaeological survey of the site was conducted in the 1870s by George Squier, an American diplomat and amateur archaeologist. Squier was the first foreigner to document the H-shaped interlocking blocks in detail. He had no explanation for them. Neither did the scholars who followed him for the next 150 years. The official dating of the site, based on carbon analysis of organic material found in foundation deposits and building matrix layers, places construction at approximately 536 to 600 CE. That puts Puma Punku at roughly contemporary with the early Byzantine period in Europe, the Tang dynasty in China, and the later stages of Teotihuacan in Mexico. A sophisticated era, a complex world, but still an ancient one, with no mechanical cutting tools and no documented engineering tradition capable of producing what you find on this plateau. For decades, scholars dismissed the precision of the stonework as the result of slow, patient labor, stone hammers, grinding with sand, bronze chisels. And those scholars are not entirely wrong. Those tools do leave traces at the site, and there is genuine evidence of hand finishing. But that explanation has a problem, a significant one. Because the precision at Puma Punku is not the kind of precision that comes from patient grinding. It is the kind of precision that requires a template, a master form that gets repeated identically across dozens of separate blocks. Grinding with sand does not produce right angles accurate to fractions of a degree across multiple independent pieces. Templates do, jigs do, machines do. Here is where it gets strange. The largest surviving stone block at Puma Punku measures 7.81 meters long, 5.17 meters wide, and just over 1 meter thick. It weighs an estimated 131 metric tons. That is heavier than the largest stones used in the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza. But this block did not come from a local quarry. The red sandstone used for the platform base was transported from a quarry located roughly 10 kilometers away, uphill across rough terrain. The andesite used for the precision-cut H-blocks came from the Copacabana Peninsula on the eastern shore of Lake Titicaca. That is approximately 90 kilometers away. Not a short walk, not a river trip, 90 kilometers of high-altitude terrain with no roads, no wheeled vehicles, and no known draft animals capable of hauling loads of this magnitude over this kind of ground. Most experts suggest the blocks were moved on reed boats across Lake Titicaca, then dragged on log rollers or earthen ramps to the site. That is a reasonable hypothesis. But when engineers and logistics specialists model this operation, account for the grades, the weight, the distances, the number of workers required, the numbers produce a civilization of extraordinary organizational power. Not a simple highland culture, an empire. An empire with surveyors, logistics managers, master stonecutters, quarry engineers, and project coordinators, operating at a scale that would challenge modern construction firms. That empire had a name, Tiwanaku. Now pay attention, because this is where the first clue comes in. The Aymara people of the Bolivian highlands have an oral tradition that describes Tiwanaku not as a city built by human hands, but as a city that appeared overnight. The phrase used in the oldest recorded versions of the tradition, documented by Spanish chroniclers in the late 16th century, translates roughly as, "It was not built, it arose." For 3 centuries, historians read that phrase as mythology, religious poetry, a creation story, the kind of thing ancient peoples say about sacred places they don't fully understand. But here is what the phrase might actually mean. In 2021, a team of researchers published a study in Science Advances analyzing ancient DNA extracted from 17 individuals buried at Tiwanaku and surrounding sites, dated between 300 and 1500 CE. What they found was unexpected. The genetic diversity at the ritual core of Tiwanaku was extraordinarily high. Individuals had ancestry not just from the Lake Titicaca Basin, but from the Amazon lowlands, the Pacific coast, and regions far beyond the direct political reach of the Tiwanaku state. They weren't locals. They were arrivals, pilgrims, workers, specialists from across the continent drawn to a single point on the altiplano. What builds a place like that? A reputation, a power, a knowledge that radiates outward and pulls the world toward it. The city did not arise overnight in any literal sense, but it may have gathered its builders from so far away and so rapidly that to the people watching it grow, it must have seemed exactly like that. They weren't guessing, they were recording. The second clue is in the geometry. Arthur Poznański was a Bolivian-German archaeologist who spent 40 years at Tiwanaku beginning in the 1890s. His life work produced a detailed astronomical analysis of the Kalasasaya compound, the great rectangular platform adjacent to Puma Punku. And his conclusions were explosive. Using the azimuth angles of solar alignments built into the structure, Poznański calculated that the Kalasasaya had been designed to precisely mark the solstices at a time when Earth's axial tilt was measurably different from today. Due to a slow wobble in Earth's axis known as obliquity, the precise angle at which the sun rises and sets at the solstices shifts over thousands of years in a pattern that can be calculated backwards with mathematical precision. Poznański ran those calculations and arrived at a date of approximately 15,000 BCE, 15,000 years before the Common Era, 17,000 years ago. The archaeological mainstream rejected this immediately, and the rejections were not unreasonable. Poznański's baseline measurements relied on reconstructed sightlines that were difficult to verify, and there is genuine ambiguity in which solar event the builders were marking. The carbon dating of organic material in the foundation layers gives a date between 500 and 600 CE. That is the accepted date. That is what the textbooks say. But that explanation has a problem too. The carbon dating was performed on organic material found within the construction layers: charcoal, wood, biological inclusions. But carbon dating of this type dates the material, not the stone. If construction at Puma Punku involved incorporating older organic material into a new foundation, if builders rebuilt, renovated, or expanded an earlier structure, then the carbon dates reflect the most recent major construction phase, not the origin, not the first version of whatever was here before the H-blocks. And here's the thing about Puma Punku that nobody in the mainstream conversation wants to talk about. The site shows clear evidence of multiple construction phases. The H-blocks are one phase. The platform beneath them is a different construction tradition entirely. Something was here before the blocks. We do not know what. The third clue is in the destruction. When Tiwanaku collapsed, and it did collapse, around 1000 CE, most likely due to a prolonged drought that destroyed the sophisticated raised field agricultural system that fed the empire. The city did not simply empty out. It was taken apart, looted, not by foreign invaders. There is no evidence of invasion. The looting was internal. Statues were broken. Temples were dismantled. Sacred stones were dragged away and repurposed. Whatever knowledge the Tiwanaku builders possessed, the templates, the cutting techniques, the logistics systems, the astronomical records, all of it vanished with the empire. Not lost to war, not buried by catastrophe, dismantled from the inside. It was sealed, it was mapped, and then it disappeared. In 2006, a team using ground-penetrating radar conducted a survey of the broader Tiwanaku complex. The results showed subsurface features, walls, chambers, possible corridors, extending beneath the modern ground surface and beneath the existing visible ruins. The survey suggested the complex was significantly larger than the visible footprint, larger than anyone had fully excavated. A permit application for deeper excavation was filed with the Bolivian Ministry of Culture. It was delayed. Funding was redirected. The deeper survey has not been resumed at full scale. Now, does this prove the most extreme version of the story? Probably not. The claim that Puma Punku is 17,000 years old rests on a single astronomer's calculations and requires us to dismiss carbon dating entirely, which is not a step any serious researcher should take lightly. The more grounded version of this story is still extraordinary. Tiwanaku was a pre-Columbian empire of genuine continental power. It fed hundreds of thousands of people through engineered, raised field agriculture. It drew pilgrims and craftspeople from across South America. It cut stone with a precision that genuinely pushes the limits of what archaeologists can explain using known tools alone. And when it fell, its technical knowledge vanished completely, leaving behind objects that the civilizations that came after it, including the Inca who inherited the landscape, freely admitted they could not replicate. The Inca had a word for the builders of Tiwanaku. They called them Viracocha. The name translates roughly as sea foam or foam of the lake. Not a word for enemies, not a word for ancestors. A word for something older, something almost mythological, in memory, even by the time the Inca built their own empire. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century and asked the Inca who built the great stones at Tiwanaku, the Inca pointed upward, not at the mountains, at the sky. They said the stones had been placed there by giants, by gods, by beings who existed before the sun. Not a myth, not a metaphor. A memory of a civilization so technically advanced and so completely erased that the only language left for it was the language of the divine. And if that's true, if even a fraction of that erased technical knowledge was real and documented and then deliberately destroyed, it means our history is missing a chapter, not a footnote. A chapter about a civilization that figured something out on a windswept plateau at 4,000 meters above sea level. Cut stone with a precision that challenges modern engineers. Moved objects weighing 100 tons across 90 kilometers of rough terrain. Built a city that drew the continent to it. And then vanished so completely that the people who came after them could not explain the ruins they had left behind. The H blocks are still there, lying in the field at Puma Punku. Some broken, some scattered, some still interlocked exactly as they were placed over 15 centuries ago. The subsurface chambers identified by the radar survey are still unexcavated. The quarries at Copacabana still bear the marks of cuts that match no known tool from the period. And the Kalasasaya still stands, its stones aligned with a sun position that has not occurred since before the last ice age. If Poznański's calculations are anywhere close to correct, nobody has gone back to measure it with modern equipment. Nobody has published a comprehensive reanalysis of the astronomical alignment using updated axial tilt tables and laser-surveyed baselines. The question is still open. It has been open for 130 years. The stone is still in the field, still waiting, still carrying its impossible geometry in silence, 12,500 feet above the sea, under a sky that has not changed since whoever built it last looked up. If you want to understand who they were, what they knew, what they lost, and what might still be buried beneath that plateau, you are not alone in asking. Leave a comment with your theory. And if this investigation moved you the way it moves us, hit like and subscribe. Every video we make is another step toward the chapter history forgot. The next one you should watch is already waiting for you.